Hey everyone, welcome back to I'm Married a Film Snob, where we review films of today and yesteryear. Today we have a double review, the original 1987 Hellraiser and the new 2022 reboot. So let's start with the original and then we'll dive into the new one. What do you say?
Here we go, let's do it.
Yeah.
Now the 1987 version is an original conception from the mind of Clive Barker, whose books and other films push the boundaries of horror and pain to extreme levels. Now, it has to be noted this was Clive Barker's feature-length directorial debut. And for being his first film, he shows an adept control of storytelling, world-building, editing, creating tension, and crafting narrative swerves that leave the audiences mesmerized by his dark conceits and simultaneously squirming in their seats.
You can tell Barker was working with a limited budget, but he squeezes every last dollar onto the screen, and the visuals and story are augmented by a great combination of raw, unfiltered imagination, production design, costumes, amazing makeup, and old-timey special effects that for the most part,
hold up.
Yeah, they hold up pretty well, even today.
Yeah. Now the premise of the original is pretty simple. A husband and wife move into a home only for the wife to discover the manifestation of her ex-lover is somehow residing in one of the upstairs unused rooms. And she will do anything, quote her, to get him back and relive their carnal desires. And then, of course, all hell breaks loose. While unwittingly, the daughter of the husband gets snared into the whole thing and she has to fight for her life and soul. While it may be easy to initially dismiss Hellraiser as another horror film from the 80s about demons terrorizing unsuspecting people, at its core though, the film is about sexual lust and the desire to reach extreme levels of sensory experience and the pitfalls that come with such urges.
The film doesn't fall into the usual narrative trappings of most 80s horror films, and I admire how it strays into nightmarish territories without limiting its scope and creating a unique universe.
Now the demons in the film, the Cenobites, and the box that unleashes them, the Lament configuration, are unique devices that allow Barker to reach deep into his toolbox of horrific images while still reverting back to the main themes of the film, deceit, sexuality, and the thin tightrope people are willing to risk to put those elements to their highest and most deprived level.
An interesting storytelling tactic of the film is that most of the first half is centered on Julia, a repressed and tortured housewife that is deeply unhappy in her marriage and longs for the sexual escapades she used to have with Frank, her husband's brother.
Much to her surprise, after moving into her husband's old family home, Frank is morphed back to life, thanks to some spilled blood. Now Frank has somehow managed to escape the grips of hell and the Cenobites after being torn to shreds, and is now floating in a sort of limbo, trying to glue himself back to life just enough to escape them for good.
While initially shocked at Frank's monstrous appearance, Julia is willing to put that aside, because she so longs for Frank's sex and lustful nature that she becomes his accomplice in restoring him back to life by feeding him unsuspecting victims she lures back to her home.
And there lies the true horror of Barker's movie, the boundaries we as humans are willing to push to get what pleases us the most.
It's not the demons that are the scariest. It's the depths Julia is willing to go to get some crazy sex action from a flesh-rotted corpse-like creature. But then about halfway into the film, Barker shifts the focus to Kirsty, Julia's husband's daughter, and her growing suspicions that her father may be in danger.
Now Barker pulls off this shift mainly by playing off of Kirsty's innocence and by making her seemingly the only character in the movie with a shred of intuition in this dark maze of deceit, murder, and demonic appearances. Barker knows how to build dread and knows how to pace scenes, move the camera, and show just enough horrific images. In this, the original and first film of this world, Barker does not overuse the Cenobites. He shows them sparingly, but when he does, it makes their appearance that much more impactful. Their mix of wounds, individually unique monstrous traits, and semi-S&M gear create a fascinating concoction that can easily be placed at the top of the heap of all-time great monsters.
I mean, Pinhead is so iconic and unique. Few other monsters can rival his look. I actually love how the villains of the film are not the usual manic, axe-wielding, fast-running, demented crazies with no moral code like most other horror films.
Instead, the Cenobites are almost elegant in their speech and demeanor, are serene and austere, and move slowly in a controlled and menacing manner. With a simple flick of the wrist, they summon chains with hooks that rip into the skin and tear you apart.
And that's if you can even call them villains. At some point, they're even referred to as angels.
Yeah, even Pinhead himself says, demons for some, angels to others. And in fact, I would hesitate to call them villains in the traditional term, because they don't prey on innocent people just for fun. Instead, if you summon them, then they come. It's a simple premise.
If you dare to seek out the box and toy with it, and in essence your fate, Then they manifest and make you regret you even went down that rabbit hole.
As a little trivia related to the film, summoning or calling out your destroyer is a recurring theme in Clive Barker's work. Candyman, also written by Barker, shares the same framework.
Yeah, the violence is strong, and the ways people are dispatched are gory delights that push the limits of our deepest fears.
The visuals are surprisingly pretty well crafted for a film of this genre, and there are some unforgettable compositions and shots throughout the film. Like Christie's nightmare witnessing a man she presumes to be her father, underneath a sheet slowly pooling blood and inundating the white of the sheets with a crimson tinge.
That's my favorite scene.
There's also a scene near the end after Julia has been killed, where Kirsty finds her in a bed holding the lament configuration.
In this scene, Julia's face and skin have been ripped open, displaying her raw flesh, and thanks to the small chains pulling the flaps of skin back, it is truly horrifying.
The movie is filled with those little moments of little glimpses of just pure horror that just linger enough for you to retain in your mind and your imagination. Now, HELLRAISER, the 1987, is a classic of horror film for a reason. It's paced just right, the acting is serviceable, and it just does everything by the books to make a perfect horror film.
So, what would you rate it?
Horror film is pretty up there, but as a film in general, I would give it a solid 7 out of 10.
Okay, not bad.
How about you?
I think it was pretty good too. I would probably give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
And now moving on to HELLRAISER 2022 reboot. So, this new version feels more like a thriller than a horror film.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sense of dread and slow building of tension from the original seems to be a little drained from this one.
Yeah, I don't think it's there at all. David Bruckner does an admirable effort trying to reboot this world. And while there are some good isolated scenes and expansion of the lore in the franchise, this new version fails to carry the sinister depravity that made the original so unique and scary. Unlike the original, the images don't linger in your mind after you finish watching the movie.
It really doesn't.
No, it's just kind of, oh, okay, and then you move on.
None of the scenes were actually memorable.
No.
This new version follows Riley, a girl struggling with sobriety and the tension between her and her brother. They share an apartment along with some other roommates. Riley's new boyfriend Trevor promises potential riches and escape from her dreary life if she helps him steal a mystery object inside a warehouse.
That's the setup, and you can guess where it probably goes from there. Instead of some great treasure chests, they uncover the lament configuration, and all literal hell breaks loose after that.
So you can probably tell we're not too impressed with it, but we'll start with what we did like about the new version.
Yeah, so we're not too rough, but although a little heavy-handed, it is a nice metaphor that Riley's world gets turned upside down and literal hell comes after her once she breaks her sobriety. When she takes a drink right before breaking into the warehouse, she soon thereafter finds the lament configuration. And when she decides to take the pills to trip out, she actually opens and let loose the demons from the configuration. So both times she breaks her sobriety, she gets a step further to unleashing these demons.
Another positive is that the movie uses practical effects well and doesn't rely too much on CGI. There's even a nice nod to the original with stop motion animation and style, in a scene where the main bad guy Voight gets his insides restored and fused back together.
Yeah, it looks like the old claymation stuff, but done nicely and cleanly for today's standards.
Yeah, the CGI is also similar to the stop motion of when Frank was regenerated.
It's getting regenerating back, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one last thing I did like about this movie is a particular scene where one of the characters, the roommate Nora, has fallen for the trap of the configuration and is now being summoned to face hell and the Cenobites. Now, usually in these movies, when something like this happens, the characters are left alone mysteriously in a room, or everyone wanders away and they're
they all
left
get
alone.
separated.
But what I liked about this one was the twist that in spite of being in a van, moving van, surrounded by her friends, the gates of hell still find her and still open up, and she vanishes before their very eyes.
And now some negatives about the film. So the main antagonist, right, the bad guy, setting up the whole thing, Voight, he felt too cartoony to me. He can't hold a candle to Frank in the original version. Yeah,
he's very cartoony and one-dimensional, and in fact, I don't think his acting is very good.
We said it.
Another thing is that you could tell from a mile away that Trevor was involved and knew more than he was leading on. And this was way too telegraphed, and it came as no surprise when it was, revealed. Oh, what a traitor. I saw it coming from the beginning.
Yeah, no surprise.
Yeah.
So now this leads us to the plot holes and just poor writing of the movie. Most annoyingly, we are never given an explanation as to why the fencing around the mansion somehow magically keeps the Cenobites out.
Yeah, is it the material that the fencing is constructed from, or the pattern motif that the fencing itself has?
We don't know.
Zero explanation. It's assumed. And that's the silly part because, the Cenobites are demons from hell with supernatural powers that can literally open portals to hell out of thin air. And as we just previously mentioned, even from a moving van. But a special metal fence is enough to keep them out. It's kind of stupid.
The original movie's theme of sex and sexual lust is largely absent from this version. It's that desire for extreme pleasure that motivates the characters, and in this version, it has been largely stripped away.
And this one doesn't have that. It's just kind of like a thriller, people running around, running away from monsters. I'm happy to report there are even scenes that involve literal secret mansion passageways, like in the old Vincent Price and Roger Corman cheesy horror films, or like the board game Clue or something. It is comical, cartoony, and just totally unoriginal and childish. It's stupid.
And another thing that didn't make sense, why do both Voight and Riley get to have their wish granted? Voight sets up the whole thing to get some poor saps to advance the box and offer them up instead of him. Riley inadvertently does the same thing. And why do they both get to face Leviathan, even though it was Voight who masterminded the whole thing to sacrifice others?
Now, while this 2022 version is a reboot and not a remake, there are some things worth noting that are totally different in the world.
In the original film, there's only one configuration and one way to open the box. You open it and that's it. The Cenobites are out. And you have to try to piece it back together to its original form, to send them back and make them go away.
Now in this new version, it's like stages or levels in a video game. There are 6 total ways the box transforms before you can beat it and then face like the final boss and be granted your wish. Mm-hmm. Also, the original box was not booby-trapped so that it was activated with a blood sacrifice.
Yeah, in this one, as you try to figure out the puzzle, a booby trap with a sharp object springs out and tricks you into making a blood sacrifice to awaken the Cenobites and make them latch onto you.
In the original, we even see Pinhead resetting the configuration himself at one point. In this new movie, the configurations continue on their own magically to their next level before a new victim has to progress them even further.
And another thing, the Cenobites are powerful, almost untouchable demons in the original, with immense powers. In the new version, Riley accidentally figures out she can actually rig the game by offering up a blood sacrifice to the box and the blood of one of the actual Cenobites chasing her.
Now by doing this, she in a way rigs the game so that one of the Cenobites ends up being offered up in the place of one of her friends. And the Cenobite in turn is torn and shred to pieces. One less bad guy for them to face, that's good. And while clever, for me it goes against the whole mythos of the universe. The Cenobites are just powerful lords.
Yeah, they're invincible.
I found it silly. Almost as silly as one of the Cenobites getting stuck in the fence inside the house. Again, these fences must be some kind of supernatural, powerful, amazing fence. I want one in my house too because it kept out even a Cenobite. It gets trapped in there. These things can walk through portals, but a fence traps it like a literal monster from any old classic cheesy movie.
Yeah, makes no sense, disappointing.
Yeah.
So similarities in both films, they both open and end with the antagonists of each film. Both antagonists are insatiable for more sensory experiences. But in the original, the bad guy is destroyed, and in the new, he's forced to become a Cenobite himself.
Shocker, he becomes a Cenobite, which is the only literal conclusion from him choosing power. Of course you become a Cenobite, they're all powerful. But then again, this is contradicted by the fact that they can get stuck in a fence. So you choose power, and you become this powerful, creature, demon, but a fence can keep you out. Not very powerful.
Yep. Both protagonists survive and their souls are spared. Kirsty uses quick thinking when she opens the box accidentally and makes a deal with the Cenobites, realizing they could be after Frank and promising to deliver him.
Yeah, and the original was much better setup. In this new version, Riley's given the option of sparing her soul should she pick an alternate sacrificial person. That kind of, again, goes against the mythos. You open the box, the Cenobites come after you. There's no negotiating. It works in the original one because she realizes one of their souls has escaped, so she promises to bring it back. Mm-hmm. But in this new one, they offer the bargain kind of from the beginning that to progress the game, you can offer up someone else.
Right.
And
immediately given that option.
Yeah, that kind of goes against the whole for me, mythos of the Hellraiser demons and the Cenobites. They don't make compromises. They don't do deals.
Absolutely not.
In the original, they even warn her, go and get Frank. That doesn't mean we might spare you. We might not. So
Exactly. So, the Cenobites. 3 of the Cenobites return in the new film. The Chatterer, the Gasp, and of course, Pinhead.
and both Pinheads say the iconic line, we have such sights to show you.
We have
such sights to show you.
Reverting back to the original, there's some additional nice touches that are missing from this one. Frank using Larry's skin to disguise himself was actually much more frightening and truly horrific. And this was pre-Silence of the Lambs, using that trick of a skin suit to kind of get away and use it as a disguise.
And in the original, there's a really great shot of Julia when she makes her first kill. And it shows the back of her heels from behind, and the very first victim crouched in a fetal position. And it is an excellent composition. And now to rate the reboot, what would you give it?
Well, compared to the original, it flops, and compared as a movie in general, it also flops. I think it fails on both ends as a horror movie, and especially living up to the myth and legend of the original. I'd have to give it a 3.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
How about you?
Pretty low. For the reboot, maybe I'd give it a 5 out of 10. Let's give it a 5.
So what do we recommend? Stick to the original.
Yeah, this one's not memorable.
Yeah, it's a classic of horror cinema with great composition, great cinematography, great costumes, great makeup. This one is just kind of like...
They tried.
Yeah, they tried, but it's a typical monster movie. And it ends up falling to the same cliche of the typical monster movie of monsters chasing you through the woods and you have to run away. And, you know, it's just silly. Mm-hmm. To close out our review, I will say the original is a much darker visual treat whose magic is unfortunately not duplicated in this new version. Watch them both and decide for yourself.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more Film Snob reviews.
Or not.
We'll tear you apart.